Welcome to The Growth Project. This is a podcast brought to you by AMPLOS. We are a performance psychology practice in Greenville, South Carolina. We exist to help you be better and pursue better, to be better for the people that matter most in your life, for the things that matter most, and pursue better to give you the information, knowledge, and hopefully encouragement to keep your dreams greater than your memories, to understand that we can create a better version of ourselves and a better version of our work. Dr. Cory Shaffer is our resident expert on the psychology of pitching. And so a little bit different of a podcast between the two of us, but really just want to pick your brain. You've been, I guess working in baseball it started at Florida State that I know of.
Yep.
In your doctorate work, and just really want to pick your brain a little bit about, hey, working at pitchers of all levels from every level, what does it take to really master the psychology of pitching, and what are some of the lessons you've learned, some of the lessons you teach, and some of the lessons that hopefully our listeners can apply?
Yeah. And I think it's probably useful from the jump here just to acknowledge, out of the gate, something that we believe in, whether or not you're interested in baseball or pitching. Some of the aspects here of mindset, mental skills as they're related to baseball and pitching, I think, these are the same skills and in many ways the same mindset that you need to be successful in life or in your work. And so just want to drop that disclaimer from the start. If maybe listening to 30 or 40 minutes on baseball doesn't feel like your thing, there's probably still some stuff in here for you. So,
yeah, I think hopefully that's with all our podcasts, that you as a listener, what we hope your job is to come with a sense of curiosity, a open mind, and kind of think about, what does this mean? What does it mean to me in this stage of life and the roles that I'm playing? But more importantly, what can I do with this information to help me be better and pursue better? And so when we think about the psychology of pitching, let's just backtrack a little bit. We've talked a little bit in previous podcasts of what motivated you to become a sports psychologist, mental performance coach, but specifically in the area of baseball. What made you gravitate towards baseball?
Yeah, I've actually thought about this quite a bit. And in many ways, I think what I've learned over time, now 10, 11 years or whatever doing this, even going back further, to graduate school, but I feel like baseball in particular is a sport, and you could probably throw golf in there as another example. It's sort of like the perfect union in my mind, or intersection of like where my skill set and my personality and my tempo and pace and sort of how I teach things, and what is required within those sports, where I think it just intersects in a very like authentic way. The pace of baseball is very slow. I tend to have, in many ways, a little bit more of a slower pace. The depth, I think, that is required for these sports, and the time spent just in your head, I think, there's incredible value there to learning how to use that time better and more effectively. As a guy who I think spends a lot of time in his own head, I feel like I can relate to players in baseball pretty easily. So I think in a lot of ways, it sort of begins there. I also think going back and just looking at my childhood, like baseball was such a big sport for me, and one that I gave up pretty early, unfortunately. I think I kind of got burnt out on it, probably had a little bit of a fixed mindset about it, I think. So there's a sense of connecting back to that, I think, when I get around baseball, which I enjoy. So yeah, I mean, a lot of different things there, but some combination of all of those.
Yeah, and so let's just talk real quick before we get into the actual psychology of pitching. You got burned out in sports. We know young people are experiencing burnout at earlier and earlier ages. What do you think is contributing to that burnout that we see, and what can parents, especially pitchers, the pressure on young pitchers is so great.
Yeah.
What can parents do to help prevent that burnout?
Yeah, I think ultimately, and research supports this in many ways, but like the early specialization is probably the big thing,
Not doing that.
Of not special. Yes. Well, yeah, like the ones who specialize, I think, become more susceptible to burnout, more vulnerable to burnout, because there's just no break from it. I think living in the South, as well, for the last 14 years, there's a new appreciation for like, man, it really is year round. Like growing up in the Northeast, that's not really the case, right? The seasons won't allow it. So you kind of just move on and turn the page to the next sport. But here, it really is and can be year round. I think there's such a draw and a push to get a college scholarship, and every parent wants to believe and hang on to the dream that their kid is, the next big thing in Major League Baseball. And of course that dream and that aspiration is fantastic. But I think when that results in just this year round baseball schedule combined with the kids, I think often feel as like this pressure to perform and be perfect.
Yeah.
Like every day they take the mound or they take the field and their college scholarship or their draft stock is on the line. Like that's just a lot to sort of handle for a young person.
Yeah, and you talked about having a fixed mindset, really understanding and belief of my identity is so wrapped up in what I do. And specifically the psychology of pitching, the pitcher is so exposed and one of the loneliest places to be in a team sport. And everybody, I just remember Little League days, the things that were said to the pitchers were not very helpful.
Right.
In that process. So if you have a young child, has an aspiring pitcher, he may be left-handed, make sure it's his dream, not yours, and make sure we're trying to add the right pressure and take away the wrong kind of pressure. So observing and working with pitchers now over the last 14, 15 years, just big picture, as you said, you gravitate towards it, the pace of the game. But what makes it unique, the psychology of pitching, what makes that such a unique skill set?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Surprise.
Yeah. Well, I think just in general, start with this. Like, you've worked in football for a long time, right? Longer than I have. And I think my observation in football pretty quickly was like, man, it's crazy how like different position groups seem to be wired in such a different way. Let's say your quarterback kind of needs to be pretty cerebral and probably a deep thinker and so on. In my experience, many like offensive linemen are very similar, right? Then you have like your straight skill players, your DBs, your wide receivers and stuff. Like, I think for what we do, maybe a little bit more hesitant to buy in. There's just so much confidence, almost borderline cockiness or arrogance with them. There's that similar sort of breakdown in baseball, and I hope I'm not generalizing too much. I think those are just trends and themes. Do you agree with some of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I was smiling because I was thinking of the players in my mind.
Yeah, I mean specialists. Specialists definitely a little more cerebral, like very in tune with routine and all these little nuances of the game. I think I learned pretty quickly. It didn't take long to realize like how different pitchers and hitters were, and in a lot of ways very similar to just how I grossly understated and maybe overgeneralized things in football, but very similar. Hitters, there's such a level of confidence and almost a stubbornness in like, well, I can just go swing more and I'll work through any slump.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Like I can just go spend 4 or 5 hours in the cages. I'll get my swing right and then I'll be good. Pitchers, I think what's really unique about pitchers is they know that there are only so many bullets in the chamber, so to speak. Right. They can't just go throw more. Right. That would lead to injury and so on, especially if you're talking starting pitcher. And that's, I think we'll probably focus on starting pitchers here. Relief pitchers is a whole other ball game.
Yeah.
Right. But like starting pitchers, it's okay. I've got 5 days, let's say, or a week between my next start. Every day is sort of programmed and there's a rhythm to it and it looks so similar. So they're very process oriented. But there's only so much that they can do with a baseball in their hand. That I think is what makes it really unique. And where I think very early on, pitchers become more open to like, I've got to find a way to close that gap on start days, to be a little bit more confident, knowing that I might only throw a 30-pitch bullpen, but I'm expected to go pitch 6 or 7 scoreless in my next start and throw 110 pitches. Like, it's just very different and unique than so many other sports.
Yeah, it's a great perspective of I can't overdo it, so I better be prepared mentally. When do you think you start seeing the shift in that we know that physical talent opens the door, but where do you think you start seeing the breakdown that the mental separation is really what creates, the mental preparation creates a separation? Where does that kind of break down in pitching?
Yeah, probably college. And I've been very fortunate, obviously, to work at players at, like, for example, at Clemson, right? An elite Power Four Division I baseball program, and has been for a long, long time. So we're kind of getting the best of the best, right? Like the cream of the crop. We're talking about the best players in each state and so on. So these kids really are that much talented that I think for most of them, high school, they can kind of breeze through it, especially the true like high school season. There's not much competition there. So that's where for them, the competition comes in these like elite travel ball schedules and so on, where at least now they're facing competition that's probably more similar to their level. But really in college, I think now, imagine being a freshman and stepping into, the clubhouse, and you're now in this environment where, well, okay, the talent pool is sort of level,
Yep.
right? There's maybe less of an advantage there. These people, every single other person in this dugout, let's say, is more physically developed than me because they have 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, time in this program with a dedicated strength coach to get their body right and so on. And they're also used to pitching to college hitters. All those things I think contribute to where very quickly I think those young guys step into, as soon as their freshman year, and they realize like, oh boy, this is a whole new ball game. And some of them, again, to be like, it'll come a little bit easier than others, but the vast majority, I think that's really where the first realization is like, okay, they're used to seeing 95 here.
Yeah.
Like,
I better come up with something different.
Exactly. It's almost like, oh, okay, my 12-6 breaking ball doesn't quite play like it did, in high school. So that I think is really where the separation starts to occur, or where the need is clear that there's now a gap, and I've got to fill that with something.
And so kind of that freshman coming into Clemson, we're talking about these elite, these significant moments. Maybe it's high school to college. Maybe it's college to minor league. Maybe it's minor league to, that moment where there's a step up in competition, mm-hmm. and you start creating a little bit of doubt in your mind. What does that look like for a pitcher? What are some of those doubts that creep in, and how does that affect their performance and preparation?
Yeah, I think some of it, honestly, is indicative of just youth sport. And this is not an indictment of youth sport coaches, but I think pitchers, like golfers, their tendency is going to just assume that if they're struggling with their performance, it's something mechanical or physical that's wrong. That's what they're going to pin it on because they haven't learned or been taught otherwise, right? Up until that point, if they were a little bit off, especially if they're dominating, it's just like, oh, well, let's see what's up on video. And, oh, I'm flying open, and that's why, I'm missing arm side up or whatever it is. They always just go straight to mechanics, right? And that's the answer. But what I really try to help them understand as soon as I possibly can is just like, hey, but what if it's not physical, right? Like your bullpen seemed fine 3 days ago, and your mechanics were great, and you felt pretty confident coming in, and then all of a sudden it's start day, and now all of a sudden your mechanics are bad. Like I don't think you got worse in the last 48, 72 hours.
So how do you raise that question? Because that's kind of what we do.
Yeah.
We've got to pose possibilities of what else might it be to kind of open the door. But how do you raise that question and not kind of shatter their confidence? How do you use that as a method to say, hey, your mechanics are really good?
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's ultimately just encouraging them and even sort of that line of questioning to get them to recognize like, okay, yeah, it was pretty good 2 days ago. It felt pretty good before the game maybe. Then I got into the moment, and now all of a sudden things changed. Yeah. Like maybe we should explore something else. And the sort of low-hanging fruit, the example or kind of the metaphor I always use is like, to just pin it each time on something physical or mechanical is the equivalent of, pulling weeds in a garden, but just pulling what you see on the surface, right? Like unless you get the root, the problem's probably going to come back. And I think that is probably what some of them realize over time is they recognize like, man, something's not right here and I need to figure it out. I'm just going to try to do it on my own. First of all, that's what many of them will do. Kind of dig their heels in, right? Not ask for help. And after so many times of doing that, I think finally they kind of throw their hands up like, all right, I don't know what to do here. this is all kind of new for me. I can't just seem to figure this out on my own. And then that vulnerability and the willingness to kind of open up and maybe explore, hey, it could be like, if I'm honest, I felt like I had to be perfect coming into this outing. And then it's crazy how quickly that expectation right now brings this sense of pressure. Cause the leadoff hitter gets a bloop single. Right. Well, now again, I felt exactly. I felt like coming in, I needed to be perfect. It's already not perfect. So things are already starting to spin a little bit. And now there's this feeling of pressure. Like, okay, I just got to get, now I have to get this next guy. Right. And ideally I'd like to strike him out, cause the ball in play, like, I don't know if I can trust my defense. I mean, all these things are running through their mind. Yeah. And I don't think they understand that can have an impact on your mechanics or how you're rushing through, your delivery or whatever it might be. Until they connect those dots, unfortunately, they're probably going to keep making the same mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about that's so much of life. We want to pin our finger on what we see and what we know and what is explainable, or in business, we want to make excuses or blame other people. But that willingness and courage to have the vulnerability to look at yourself, be willing to ask for help and see it from a different perspective. And then the stress of that experience when it doesn't go as planned, like that stress speeds you up, as you know, or slows you down. And the harder you try, the further away you get.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's also where you see, I mentioned about myself, probably looking back, having a pretty fixed mindset about who I was as an athlete in general, but certainly as a baseball player, that now gets magnified too.
Yeah.
You see pretty quickly who's going to stick this out and get better because of this experience and the failure, the setback, being challenged, and who already has decided it's indicative of this place, this coach, this whatever, just trying to pin it on anything other than like, hey, I just need to get better.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not as good as I thought I was. And like that's obviously a very hard thing to come to terms with. So as you mentioned before, there can be a little bit of a bluntness involved in this process. But at some point that's what they need, is that realization of like, man, this doesn't mean I can't be great.
Yes.
But right now I'm not.
Yeah. And taking ownership of that. That's why that growth versus fix is so important, is that growth mindset, mistakes and challenges, opportunities for growth and to get better. Fixed mindset is we look to make excuses and blame other people.
Yep.
And I talk a lot about maturity coming close to matching talent. And it takes a lot of maturity to be willing to ask for help with that awareness. And so as you start building these relationships with these pitchers and you start teaching them about the mental game, and I think the hardest part for pitching is kind of like our specialists, it's kind of like for golf, the game starts with you.
Yeah.
As a pitcher, nothing starts. It rides and goes on that first pitch. How do you teach? What's different about handling that pressure, especially baseball, with that individual focus in a team sport?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, the reality is a lot of these guys are very competitive and they want to win. But helping them to recognize that, hey, the best thing that you can do for your team is to make sure that you are mentally ready yourself to give your best. And that may start, conversations you're very familiar with and have had plenty of over the years, but like, hey, let's just explore, what does that even mean? Right? What does it mean for you to be at your best on start day? And then let's backtrack from there. And what can we do to help facilitate that? What actions and decisions can we make over the course of the week, that day of, in the bullpen, whatever, to kind of get you into the right mindset? Because the reality is the physical aspect of pitching, there's always going to be variability. Even the best pitchers in baseball, the guys who will win the Cy Young this year, you look through their game logs and their starts, and there's some stinkers in there, every one of them, right? And so because there's just naturally going to be sort of this variability in my quote stuff, right, or what I'm presenting physically, the best thing I think you can do for yourself, for the team, is just to show up the way you want to show up mentally. And I think setting that tone for the guys around you, I think provides a level of calm and a peace of mind for them, even when they see you like, all right, yeah, he's ready to compete today. And the ballpark doesn't know that maybe you don't have your best stuff. right? But to show up and not necessarily feel the need to do anything different to get yourself ready to go, but just have enough confidence to say like, hey, whatever I have today is good enough.
Yeah.
And, I always tell the great quote from John Lester, who's former pitcher for the Red Sox, the Cubs, handful of teams. And basically he says, I get 30 starts. As a Major League Baseball starting pitcher, I get about 30 starts a year. About 5 of those, I'm probably going to have my A game, like my best stuff. Everything's on. Velocity's good. Movement's good, whatever. About 5 starts a year, I'll have my C game, like the exact opposite. Nothing really feels great. Velocity's down. Movement on my off speed isn't good, and so on. And so about 20 out of those 30 starts, I've got something in between, right? Maybe this one pitch feels good, but my off speed doesn't. Mentally, I feel good, but man, my body's just not feeling great. Whatever it is, right? You talk to pitchers about that, and they're like, man, it's remarkable how accurate that is, just in general, right? Like your average day at the office, so to speak, is like, this is good, this isn't so good. You kind of have something in between, very average and very good. And so his point is, though, your success as a Major League Baseball player, now talking about the pinnacle of the game, is not dependent upon the A game.
Yeah.
Right? It's on the 25 out of the 30 starts that you don't. Like, what do you do on those days? And that's what's so important for pitchers to overcome, is that's a huge cognitive hurdle for them to recognize that, hey, I still can get outs. I can still compete my butt off. It may not look pretty, but it's not a beauty contest.
Yeah.
And I just need to get outs.
Yeah, and I think that's such a great mindset for life and any other sport. Can you be proud of how you compete?
Right.
Can you be proud of how you show up and find a way to fight with what you have and who you have? Yep. And too many times, I imagine it's real easy for pitchers, and especially young pitchers, like, I don't have it today. Mm-hmm. I don't, like, man, it doesn't feel right. And your feelings will betray you. Yep. Because it's as you think, so you are, not as you feel, so you think. And you can talk yourself out of finding a way to compete. So kind of one of the things I talk about is giving each play, each pitch a life of its own. Mm-hmm. And so what would a good mental strategy be? Hey, first inning, 3 up, 3 down, 9 pitches. Second inning, back-to-back home runs, right? Because beyond success and failure, what's a strategy to kind of stay in the present moment, whether it's good or whether it's bad?
Yeah, it's hard. I think at the core of baseball, pitching, sports, right, is how do you manage kind of the ebbs and flows, and can you stay consistent and steady? And so I think it probably starts there, and yet that's still easier said than done. Having a pre-pitch routine that you can turn to that you feel like helps you accept and move on from whatever just happened, good or bad, and move on to the next pitch. One of the things that I think has been helpful, that I've encouraged of some guys, and I think has connected well for them, it can be so easy in the moment to begin this narrative in your mind around not just like, okay, there's a runner on first, but how he got there.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I threw such a great pitch, and, he got this, just kind of flicked his barrel out and hit this little bloop single, and like, woe is me, I can't believe that. Or I just went through this 8 or 9 pitch battle with this guy, but on, pitch number 5, I had strike 3, but it didn't get called. Like, the reality is, it doesn't matter how he got to first base. He's on first base.
Yeah.
And as long as you're living in that space of telling the story of how he got there, you're probably not going to be fully present for the next pitch that you need to throw. And so, at some point, pulling that out and just sticking with the facts and sort of the neutral or more productive way of just looking at, like, okay, runner on first, nobody out, two hole hitters up. And I need to give my best focus to the 2-hole hitter because he might be the best hitter in their lineup. Like, that's the reality of the situation, right?
You can go back and create the story later. You can watch
Correct.
the film. You can kind of break that down. But performance and life happens in the present moment.
Right.
And I love how you bring it back. Like, here are the facts. Yep. Don't care. Like, my fault. Like, he's on first base.
Yep.
Here's the situation. Here's the pitch that's required. That's a great way to stay in that present moment.
Yeah, and again, like, that's sort of a big name in the field of sports psychology. Dr. Ken Ravizza passed away a couple years ago. He always defined competing in baseball, and he did a lot of work in baseball, as you give 100% of what you have in the moment to win the next pitch. Mm-hmm. But 100% of what you have implies you're not always going to have 100%.
Yeah.
You're not always going to feel great about what just happened or where you're at in the game or whatever. It doesn't matter. Is can you take what you have and direct it towards the next pitch? And that's the point. And man, is that hard for guys to do sometimes, is to admit that, like, you know what, after A, B, C happened, if I'm honest, I think I stopped competing.
Yeah.
Like, that's a hard thing, right, to come to terms with, because what you're acknowledging is in that moment, like, I didn't give my best effort. And the reality is I let what happened in these previous pitches and the fact that maybe we got down in the game, I let that then impact what happened and what came next. And so,
and I think that's what I've learned. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, you're good.
I think that's where people, Cory, that really is what eats at their soul.
Yeah.
That not that they got beat, but they didn't give everything they had. They didn't
Correct.
control. Like that's where regret.
And that to me is like the strength of pitchers, though, is many of them, certainly not all of them, but many of them, there's a level of humility where at some point, right, like there's an acknowledgement of, like, there's nobody else to point to here but me.
Yeah.
And if you continue to point the finger at pitching coach called the wrong thing or catcher called the wrong pitch, like, well, you had to agree to throw it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, at some point, and if you're not throwing the pitch with full intent or with full conviction, is that on the catcher or is that on you? And man, I've had to have some really good conversations. So obviously this comes back to, at the core, there needs to be a relationship to have these types of conversations, because somebody has to be willing to tell that person, like, hey, you got to look in the mirror first and foremost. And, you know, I've again been fortunate to work with great people over time, who many are willing to hear that, right? I mean, many athletes are very coachable. They want to get better and so on.
There is some freedom in talking to, because we aren't deciding playing time.
Correct. Yeah.
We aren't deciding when you're. So there's some freedom that we offer.
Yep.
That, hey, we're a safe place to talk to.
Well, one of the things, man, I hate to hear it, and it's not just pitchers, but it certainly happens in the baseball space, is this just like, well, you know, I just want to win so bad. That's why I get so emotional. I get frustrated. I get angry. And then it just, you know, it derails my outing. It's just because I want to win so bad. And man, I've had to have some hard conversations and just look at people and be like, I don't think you want to win that bad. And I had one kid, I remember, I mean, he looked like he wanted to punch me. You know, like I was challenging his manliness or something. And I was just like, look, man, because the reality is, if you wanted to win that badly, then the best thing you could have done in the moment is move on to the next pitch.
Yep.
Right. And so you want to appear as if you care so much and you want to win so bad. But if you actually are committed to that, then it should look a whole lot different.
And I think that's where the expectations and social media crafts a story of this guy's got grit or he's tough and he's a competitor. And it's all based on these false assumptions of the emotion associated with it.
Yep.
And especially a pitcher to be calm and poised, because we can interpret that as, oh, he just doesn't care.
Yeah.
But if some guy's mad and upset, but like, okay, well, how's that helping?
Exactly.
How's that helping you throw the next pitch?
And it's more about just being authentic, right? There are plenty of pitchers, you know, I always use like Max Scherzer. I don't even know if I'm Max Scherzer as an example, but he approaches everything like with this level of intensity, and you can kind of see it in his face. And
I don't know anything about that.
Yeah. And then you have other guys who are sort of calm, cool, and collected. So I think if you're an intense guy, it's fine to be intense.
Yes.
Right. But channel it appropriately. Right. And put it into the next pitch. Like, that's what I think your teammates, that's what I think the coaching staff, manager, whoever, like, that's what they want to see is like, hey, despite the fact that you just got punched in the mouth, are you willing to get right back in there and throw the next pitch with conviction? That is so much more important than the fact that you just gave up a run or two. Yeah. That's going to happen.
That's what's going to lead your team. Like, that's going to set the tone. That's we talk about looking the part.
Yep.
Hey, what did Mandela say? If you want to wear the costume, if you want to look the part, you got to wear the right costume. Mm-hmm. And so that, from a spirit of authenticity, is like, this is who I am, and your teammates are gonna feed off of that.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed.
So one of the things I think you do a great job of, and I hear this as you're talking, maybe because I just know your work so well, we talk about the difference between evaluation and criticism. Mm-hmm. And that criticism really stifles growth and limits creativity. How have you taught your pitchers to evaluate instead of criticize?
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of central, or core to, I guess, my philosophy and how I want to do work. And that goes regardless of sport, but I think it's very, very applicable and almost in some ways, many ways, easier to do for pitchers. I think it's actually more of a challenge for hitters to do just because of the sheer volume, playing every day, 4 or 5 at-bats every day.
Yeah.
There's a lot there to try to like evaluate and pick through. Pitchers, though, again, because like I meant, let's say starters, you've got 5, 6, 7 days between your next start. You have nothing but time. And so I think one of the best things that you can learn to do, and this is aligned to how we teach things here more broadly in AMPLOS, but it's got to start with some awareness. And so whether the last one was great or it was awful, you need to understand what went into that and how you got that result. And the reality is, I've asked this question many times to many athletes over the years, but in your absolute best performance, is there something you could have done better? Yes. In your absolute worst performance, are there things that you still did well? Yes. All right, well, every other outing you've ever had falls somewhere in between.
Yeah.
So we can probably find some good and some bad in each one. So just talking through the importance of and giving them a framework for how to kind of reflect on and evaluate their outings is sort of a starting point. And just letting them do it, knowing that it's probably going to be pretty bad at first, but they just need the experience of doing it. My expectation isn't that they come out of the gate and it's just perfect. They just need to try it. They need to establish the behavior before we sort of refine the details of it. And so I'll let them do it and sort of take a stab at it. And then after a couple, I'll give them feedback. And it's amazing how, I use this as an example recently. Actually, I worked with a Major League Baseball player last year, talked to him about evaluating his outings, gave him a framework to do it, shared a Google document. His first 2 of spring training, just let him do on his own. And then we reconnected, a week or 2 later, and just went through them. And ultimately just wanted to show him, right? Like not prove a point, but just, hey, he says this. And I just say, well, like, tell me more. And then he's able to elaborate on it for the next 5 minutes. And I'm kind of like, see how much more there is?
Yeah.
Right. And whether it's good or bad, again, like, hey, great performances at that level, like they don't just grow on trees. So the better we understand the variables that were present that produce that, the more likely we can replicate it in the future.
Yeah. I think that's what people get. Like they go try to recreate the performance instead of recreate the variables that contributed to the performance.
Correct. And so getting them to connect those dots, though, like many of them have never really thought in that way.
Yeah.
Because like we talked about earlier, they always just were like, well, I just throw hard or, I just have nasty stuff or whatever it is. But getting them to connect those dots is really important. And so this particular guy I'm describing, his third evaluation then of his third, this is spring training, right? So we'd probably only pitch in 2 or 3 innings, but what was like a quarter of a page, half a page was now more than a page. Mm. And you could see how much more depth he was able to go into very quickly just because I showed him and helped him refine, like, do you see the information that, like, the gold we're mining for is this. It's the process of how that's happened. It was what were you thinking in some of these moments? What were you feeling in some of these moments? Like, take yourself back to that place and evaluate, hey, everything changed at this one pitch. Well, man, don't you think we should spend time thinking about that one pitch? Right? And the better we understand what happened there and then what happened next, those little moments, the more of those we sort of capture over time is how hopefully we limit those moments down the line. And so, yeah, there's absolutely, again, like a very long-term approach, which some of them I think get frustrated by. But I tell every one of them in spring training, let's say, if we're talking big leaguers or college players, like, hey, January, February, like I'm concerned with who you are for a Major League Baseball player, let's say. I'm concerned with who you are in September, not in March. You know what I mean? And can we start taking steps forward and start closing that gap to where you feel like, and even beyond that, right, is like next season, I hope that you're learning just as much as you are this season. And if you do this the right way, that will absolutely happen.
Yeah, and I think we just want a short-term fix.
Yeah.
What did Socrates or Aristotle say? The unexamined life is not worth living.
Mm-hmm.
And so this framework, real quick, what are some highlights of the framework? You mentioned a little bit, what were you thinking? What were you feeling?
Yeah, I mean, you can simplify it down to just, what worked well, why and how did it go that way, what didn't go well, why and how, and then, takeaways, lessons learned. I'll tweak and adjust that based on, the athlete himself. What do they think is important? We've documented on the podcast here my work with Spencer Strider. Spencer and I have kind of refined his his post-game evaluation over time to include the things that we think are most important for him. But that's also him taking ownership over the process. And that's what I tell them all is just like, look, try this. If there are things you like, don't like, something's missing here, like this isn't for me. Ultimately, this is for you. And so I think it's always important what I have them take note of, because we want to be able to refer back to this. I know you've done this with your athletes as well. The date, the opponent, the location. Yeah. Right. I think that's relevant. And then after the fact, and most of the time the athletes don't even fill this in, is the result. I'll go back in and fill in the result, because again, we are connecting. This isn't growth for the sake of growth. It's growth for the sake of performing the way you want to perform, and getting the desired result. So to connect dots between, okay, this is what I was thinking and feeling, but this was the outcome. I'll go in a lot of the time and fill that stuff in. But I think it's really useful, especially for these pitchers, anybody for that matter, to establish going in, just what is your intent today? Yeah. Like, what are you focused on? Right. And if you just take a couple of minutes before your start to kind of say, this is how I want to show up today. This is where my focus is going to be. I think that sets the tone, and now the quality of what you do will probably match.
Yeah. You just mentioned in life, I don't think we do that. We just kind of wake up and go through the motions. And that's why this is so relevant to the world, is we don't have clear intentions. It's not consistent with our goals. We get in our own head and we stay stuck in the past, or we anticipate the future and we aren't in the present of what we're trying to accomplish. And then we don't take the time to really examine, well, what was different and why and how, and what didn't work and why and how, and what am I learning along the way?
Yeah. And I mean, from there, primarily that pregame is just sort of like, just prime yourself for like, how do you want to show up? What is your mindset for the day? Some of these big league guys, I've gotten the habit of like every start day, I'll shoot them a text and just say, hey, you tell me about your mindset. I used to be the one to tell them like, hey, here's what I think you need. And then I think over time, it didn't take me long to recognize like, again, this isn't about what I think. It's about what they think. So you tell me, what mindset do you want to have today? But most of that work again is done in like after the outing, after the game, and just giving them the opportunity and sort of the format to explore that in any way that they want. Again, can give them that simple framework, the good, the bad, and so on. But again, I think these guys end up being at such a level where I shouldn't have to address like your overarching mindset going into a game. Like, you're a professional baseball player.
Yeah, but it's discouraging how many people.
No doubt, and that's what I'm saying. Like that tone, we work through that early in the process, right? But once that is checked, not that we never have to revisit it, but it's almost like I have to talk to high school kids just about having the right mindset to show up to play a baseball game. Yeah, right. You're a professional, right? I shouldn't have to address like, hey, just from the start, you weren't in the right headspace today. You know what I mean? We're focused in so granular, like I mentioned, on, I mean, man, Strider and I have spent 45 minutes talking about one or two pitches. Yeah. Because that's the difference in that world. The margins are so small between a good one and a great one. Yeah. 6-7 scoreless, or 5 1/3, 3 earned, and pretty good, right? Put my team in a position to win, but not great.
Yeah, you just, to me, highlighted the difference between high school, college, and pro.
Exactly, but that's my point, right? College kids, like, there's still a little more, you'll see, like, stretches where it's just like, it was good, and then fell off a cliff. It'll get bad quick sometimes.
And they don't know why.
Exactly. But that's the point, right? Is we got to teach them how to think through things. We have to teach them how to evaluate. But the pro guys, like, that's the point, right? Is like, man, I should never have to address with these guys like, hey, this stretch, you just seem to be in a terrible mindset. And it doesn't, I mean, they're human. It doesn't mean that it won't happen from time to time, but the vast majority of the time is we're honed in on like very specific moments, and we're trying to capture as many of those as we can again. So in the future, like, hey, you'll probably be in a similar situation. But because you lived through this one and you actually learn from it. Yes. We can have a better response the next time around.
Well, that's what I hear through all of it. It's not your mental game, it's theirs.
Correct. And that's why, I've at this point, I've talked to agents and all this kind of stuff for these pro guys. And one of the things I've actually gotten feedback on, which I appreciated just hearing this, was, a lot of the people in this space, they attempt to just, here's your cookie cutter program, do it like this.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, man, I just don't like that, because if that's how I'm going to operate, like you just said, they're always implementing my mental game, not theirs. Right. I want to teach you. I want you to understand why we're doing this to begin with, instead of just handing you the answers to the test. Right. I'm going to sort of nudge you in the right direction. I'm going to provide examples. Like, I'll make sure that you have what you need to kind of get it started and get it going. But the onus here is on you to experiment with it, to try it out, and to see what works and makes sense for you. It is yours.
Yeah, and I think with anything we present at AMPLOS, there's framework and fundamentals that we wholeheartedly believe in and teach. But it's your job to integrate into who you are and what you believe and how to make it work for you.
Correct. And when you do that, it's yours, and you're going to be so much more committed to it, so much more convicted in it, right? Than if it's mine. Yeah. And you're kind of just, you're wearing my shoes to work or something. Like, that's not how this should be, right? This is,
I'm not wearing the J.
and so, that's ultimately, to me, what's more important is I'm trying to empower them to make it their own. They're the ones who have to go do it. So they need to be confident in it, comfortable in it. But a lot of people, to be honest, especially these younger generations, like, they just want the answers to the test.
Yeah.
And that's just one thing I try to make known from the beginning is, like, again, I'll provide you a framework. I'll point you in the right direction. I'm not going to give you the answers to the test.
And that is good fundamentals, whether you're a pitcher, whether you're a leader, whether you're a parent. Our job is not to make people dependent on us. Mm-hmm. Like, they got to take this information.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, this has been awesome. I love kind of picking your brain on the psychology of pitching, and I think there are so many parallels to life. Final thoughts, comments before we wrap up?
No, I mean, where I started, I think hopefully this didn't end up being too baseball specific, although there was a lot of baseball language, like you mentioned, right? Like, there's a lot of this, I think, that applies to everybody, regardless of what you're doing or sport. And I believe in some of these fundamental things, everything we talk about on the podcast, like you just said, we're not necessarily saying, hey, here's the script, go do it, right? Take 2 of these and you're just going to have a better mindset. It's you got to go try it out. You got to be willing to be vulnerable and explore that yourself. And there's some trial and error involved in that. That's a little bit more it takes a little bit more time and responsibility, but the payoff is in the long run. And that's everything that we're trying to do is about the long run. It's about long-term sustainable change and growth, not about some quick fix that's going to help you feel good today. So.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Well, I love hearing the passion. I appreciate you sharing with it. Thank you for listening. And until next time, continue to be better and pursue better.